this evening I would like to elaborate on what we spoke about in the last class. I know there's one or two people here that weren't in the last class, so I'll try to recap quickly on some of it so you have an idea of what we were discussing. The subject of tonight's information is going to be morphogenetic waves. This was a new concept for me. I'd never heard of it before until about 3 days ago when they started explaining to me about the processes that particles go through at certain points in a time cycle, as far as the Earth's time cycle in its evolutionary course. There's a couple things we need to understand first before we get into morphogenetic waves. The first thing is a morphogenetic field. Now, the word morphogenetic basically refers to simply the form-holding structure that sets and holds the design or the imprint for what's going to manifest in matter. Everything has a morphogenetic field, and within that field is contained the basic structure for its biological form, its consciousness, the way the molecules are going to assemble themselves. Within the human morphogenetic field is contained the imprint for our DNA, and our DNA manifests through the morphogenetic field. So a morphogenetic field is basically just a form-holding energy structure that gives matter particles something to fill out. It gives structure to matter. And if we understand that, we can get a little bit of an idea right off the top about what a morphogenetic wave might be. There are periods of time when energy is released from the Earth, and particles and antiparticles fuse and come together, and when that fusion occurs, both particles and antiparticles literally disappear, and they go back and return to the morphogenetic field. So when I'm speaking about morphogenetic waves, this is what I'm talking about. Before we get any more into the waves, I'm going to go down through some of the things I have listed here. In the last class, we discussed something called the sphere of Amenti. Now, the sphere of Amenti represents the morphogenetic field for our species. It was created about 550 million years ago and put here in order to hold the evolutionary blueprint for our race. It holds the structure of our DNA, the smaller structures of the different races that will evolve through the species. And it is also the energy field that souls have to move through in order to incarnate onto Earth. And when they die, they need to move back through that morphogenetic field, sphere of Amenti, in order to leave the system that we're in, the Earth system. So the sphere of Amenti is a very important thing to our species. It's been a secret for thousands and thousands of years. Very few people on the planet ever knew about the sphere of Amenti. It is literally a sphere of energy, and within that sphere is the connection between each one of us, the planet, and where we came from before we were here. So the sphere of Amenti was created. We were created before the sphere of Amenti was created. We were created as part of a larger morphogenetic field that was part of a planet called Terra, which is in Harmonic Universe 2. There was a cataclysm there that ended up with part of Terra's energetic grid being blown apart and ending up in Harmonic Universe 1, which is where we are right now. The souls that were part of that grid that blew up and ended up down here are the souls that are ending up incarnating on Earth. They would not have had an imprint to incarnate through. They would have been distributed through the unified field of the dimensions of 1, 2, and 3 with no form of sentient consciousness, because they lost their evolutionary blueprint when that cataclysm occurred. There were several groups of guardian races from Harmonic Universe 2 that created the sphere of Amenti to put back together the morphogenetic field, the imprint and blueprint for what the race was supposed to be. So these souls, these people who ended up having their souls fragmented down here, would once again have the form-holding imprint for them to evolve through. They would have become part of the plant and animal kingdoms if they did not have that. So the sphere of Amenti is something that each and every one of us, being human, is directly connected to. And the Guardians started teaching me about this only about a month ago. I'd never heard of it before. It's called Amenti because that was actually a place on Terra, and they called it that because the Guardians that helped us to create the sphere so we could evolve down here were from that area on Terra. But they've been explaining to me some very, very detailed information that's going to be contained in the Voyager's book. I can't cover a lot of it off the top of my head because I'm learning it too. But the sphere of Amenti has been very, very important to the process of our evolution ever since we have been here. And there are certain things that are taking place now that, in our times, within the next 20 years, that directly involve changes within the status of the sphere of Amenti. And it allows us to have an opportunity that we don't get very often, an opportunity as people in bodies and also an opportunity as souls. So by the end of tonight's discussion, I hope to convey the understanding of the science of something called ascension. People in our society, especially people of scientific persuasion, tend to look at ascension as some lofty spiritual concept that, man has invented in order to entertain himself because he doesn't want to face his limited existence. Ascension is not that. Ascension is a science. It's the science of multidimensional physics, and it's the science of how consciousness and biology evolves from the lower dimensions into the higher dimensions. The sphere of Amenti is a very important part of humanity's process of evolution, because it is through that morphogenetic imprint that we have to move in order to get out of the dimensions of 1, 2, and 3 that we are stuck in right now. So we're going to discuss a little bit about the process of ascension, and at the end I would like to get into DNA, because it all comes down to our DNA imprint that we carry around in our bodies right now. Whether or not we have the ability to ascend now or in another 26,000 years is going to be determined by what's contained in our DNA within the next 20 years. And that's a pretty profound concept. When you think about it, most people think about DNA and they think, yeah, I know it's in there someplace and, it directs the cells, whoopee. It's a lot more than that. It does do that. But there are ways that we can consciously interact with our DNA strands in order to add things to them that we need in order to ascend. So, to give me a little bit of an idea of what the sphere of Amenti is, it is a morphogenetic field, the one for our race. The next morphogenetic field I'd like to discuss is the one called Earth core. It's in the frequency bands of the second dimension. It holds the form and the pattern for the manifest particles of Earth. And it's also been referred to as the cave of creation, because when a soul, be it human or another type of life form, wants to incarnate here, it has to move from its own morphogenetic field down into the Earth's morphogenetic field before it can birth into a body here. So the science of ascension and the science of how we get here, where we came from, all comes back to one thing, and that's a morphogenetic field. So there is one in the Earth core, there is one that governs the pattern of our races and our race's evolution. And there are interactions that take place between them at certain points in time cycles that are very important. And we are coming up on one of those important points in the time cycle very, very soon. On to the second one. The next item I'd like to recap from last week or last class is something called the blue flame staff of Amenti. Now, the blue flame of Amenti represents a portion, not the whole thing, but a portion of the morphogenetic field for a planet called Terra, which is Earth's counterpart in the next harmonic universe up. Each of the planets in our solar system received one part of that morphogenetic field. And what it does is it connects the planets down here to the original planetary body that they came out of. The planets, the 12 planets in our solar system, actually came out of one planet called Terra in the second harmonic universe. And that eventually, through billions of years, is where those planets will evolve back into Terra, as long as they have that connection, energetic connection, between the grid of the planet here and Terra's grid. That energetic connection is a part of the morphogenetic field of Terra, and it's called the blue flame, or the staff of Amenti. They call it the blue flame because to see it, it's about this high, and it looks like a standing wave pattern of blue energy, and it kind of oscillates very slowly, and it's very, very cool, but it looks like a flame pattern, so that's why they use the symbolism of the blue flame. Okay. There's a relationship between the ascension process, between the sphere of Amenti, which is our morphogenetic field, and between the blue flame. In order for the energetic connection to be made between the sphere of Amenti and Terra, the blue flame has to be, its frequencies have to be opened in conjunction with the opening of our race morphogenetic field in order for the process of ascension to take place. Ascension is a very complex process in certain ways. It demands a knowledge of multidimensional frequency bands. It demands a knowledge of bass tones and overtones and how they combine to form resonant tones, and that's very, very complex stuff that we're basically saving for books because I don't think I could talk about it off the top of my head. But ascension is not just a personal thing. When we think about, okay, where are we going to evolve? After we leave our bodies, let's just say, what if we happen to still be alive? A lot of people don't realize that you are, but you most definitely are. As a person, an individual, you will still have to make choices after you leave the physical body. You will find that you are confronted with the reality of ascension, or not, once you cross over. There's an advantage to ascension, because ascension means going up to the next harmonic level up. That universe is something that's been described in our biblical stories as heaven, because compared to what it's like here, especially now, it is. It is a place of beauty, and it is a place of immortal bodies, which is something we were designed to have that was taken away from us by genetic manipulations that were done. So ascension is something that you can ignore when you're here, but you're better off not ignoring it, because as soon as you cross over in the death transition, you will be faced with what you did. Did you ignore it or didn't you? Because if, once you realize you're awake and aware on the other side and you have someplace you have to go next, there are options to go to nice places, and there are options to come back here where you have to do some more hard work. If you make choices to ignore the concept of ascension while you're here, there's a lot of work that can be done while you're in your body to prepare yourself for what you're going to experience when you do cross over. And what's really exciting about the science of ascension is that it's not just about what happens when your body dies. Because some of us who are able to build the gene codes to the full extent, you need to have 5 strands of DNA in order to be able to transmute the body, teleport it directly up to Terra, and turn it into an immortal body, which will make changes in the cellular structure that will perfect it, where your thought will direct what your body manifests. We will overcome disease. We will overcome death if we choose. It is an option that we have. And when this was explained to me, that was pretty awesome to me, to realize, oh gee, this isn't, don't talk to me about things that are going to happen after I die. I don't really care. I'll deal with it when I get there. But then they explained to me, it's not just about when you die. It's about what you can do with your reality right now. We're being offered an opportunity in the way the time cycles are right now to be able to immortalize our bodies. And if we are unable to do that, we can at least make a whole lot of progress in where our consciousness is going to end up once we do drop our bodies in death. And I'm sure every one of you and anybody who listens to this tape, you are going to wake up on the other side. And you are going to have to make choices, and you're going to have to see what choices you could have made better from here. Nobody's going to judge you but yourself. But where your consciousness vibrates. Everything is frequency. Everything is particles of energy that move at certain speeds. When you cross over, your consciousness will take with it the imprint that your DNA had here. If you only had 3 strands built here, you will switch over with the frequencies of 3 dimensions within your consciousness, which means you will have to reincarnate in the first harmonic universe cycles. You will not have the option of going to the higher realms until you build the frequency within your own personal morphogenetic imprint. So the process of ascension and learning about the sphere of Amenti and learning about the dynamics involved is a way of planning your journey. Now, a lot of us would be very careful if we were going to, go to a foreign country or something. We'd make plans. We'd be sure what hotel we were staying at. We'd have everything, just the way we needed it. We wouldn't just pick up and go and not even pack a bag. We're all in a process here. So many of us here have forgotten that we came from someplace and we're going someplace after we leave the physical bodies. We make no preparation for this journey. We don't think about anything except what takes place on planet Earth. And that's a shame, because reality is much, much larger. So in getting involved with the ascension process, I hope I can inspire people to want to do that, because it's more than just spirituality. It will give you that. It will give you expansion of consciousness, but it will also give you the power to transmute your biology. And if you have limitations physically, if you have sicknesses, and you start to learn the process of DNA building and learning how to pull in your higher levels of consciousness, you will learn how to fix those diseases. If you have things in your life that you don't like the way they're going, if you learn to access those higher levels of consciousness, you will be able to fix them. And if not fix them, at least understand why you're creating them in the first place. So that's my speech for trying to get people interested in the process of ascension. And it seems the Guardian Alliance is trying very hard in the way they present their information to get the scientific community to wake up and say, listen, this is something important. This is something that's not just a bunch of spiritual people getting together with some ideas. This is a literal scientific process about how particles behave. And it just so happens to also be the process by which your consciousness evolves. So a lot of the stuff they're giving us is very, very technical. I'm going to try to simplify it for the discussion, because I would probably have to read it in order to convey the level of technicality involved. Okay? Now, when I'm talking about time cycles, there's a set order or structure to the cycles of time. Time is not a random happenstance thing that just happens to occur. It is not a linear progression. It is a cyclic progression through unified fields of dimensionalized energy. Now, within one harmonic universe, which is a composite of 3 dimensions. Right now we're in harmonic universe 1. It's made of dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Dimensions are composed of frequency bands of frequency. And there's 12 primary frequency bands, 12 frequency bands in each of the dimensions, or there's sub-frequency bands actually. There's different delineations there. But you need to understand, in order to understand the significance of the time cycles, you need to have some idea that dimensions are not just a vague hypothetical thought about something. They're literal. They are literal stacking of patterns of frequency that create certain perceptual distortion as consciousness moves through it. And one of those perceptual distortions is the illusion of matter, of physical matter. So when we are dealing with a time cycle that Earth is in right now, we're dealing with the harmonic universe 1 time cycle. That time cycle, eventually I'll have the diagrams done to show you how this is laid out, art saw that. But the time cycle is called a Uego. Now, there's several different types. There are pardos in the Guardian's vocabulary. There are Uegos and several other divisions of time cycles. The Uego is what we're concerned with right now, because this is the part of the process of our ascension, of our ability to ascend. We are dependent upon the planetary time cycle and what stage the planet is in. Now, a Uego is a harmonic time cycle. That means it's the full time cycle, the time it would take for the Earth to evolve through dimensions 1, 2, and 3 and be ready to transition over into the next harmonic up. That takes place in a process of 26,556 years. That's a long time, at least for a person to be on the planet. It's not a very long time for planets themselves. It's actually pretty rapid ascension if they did it that way. We've been in our present Uego for almost 8 full cycles of 26,556 years. We didn't have to, but there are certain conditions that have to be met before a planet can transition into the next harmonic universe up. The process of moving through the time cycles is a process of the morphogenetic field of Earth core progressively pulling into itself more of the sub-frequency bands that each dimension is composed of. And as it pulls in all of the ones from dimension 1, then it shifts into the time cycle that represents dimension 2. Dimensions and time cycles go hand in hand. And the process of ascension and the process of growth is about pulling frequency bands from the unified field into the morphogenetic field, which expands the morphogenetic field and moves it up to the next level. And that is what the process of dimensional ascension is about, all the way up through the 15 dimensions. So right now, Earth is in a Uego. It's in the first harmonic universe. We have, the Uegos, which are the larger time cycles, they're composed of 6 smaller time cycles of 4,426 years each. Now, 4 of those time cycles are spent in what they call the particum universe, which is the particle universe. 2 of those time cycles are spent in the parallel universe, or the antiparticle universe. At the position in time that we are right now, we have gone through first, second particum cycles. We have gone through the 2 parallel universe cycles and 1 of the other particum cycles. We're in the last 4,426-year period of our larger Uego cycle. Some very special things happen at the beginning and end of a Uego cycle. They call them ascension cycles. And in those periods of time, there are 2 positions within each of the 4,426-year periods on each end of the Uego cycle, where portals open between harmonic universe 2 and here. That means mass ascension can occur during those times, but only during those times. And 26,000 years is a lot of time to spend here before you have the opportunity to do something like this. We are coming up on a point in time right now in the year 2017, when we are at the halfway point in that last cycle. Now, at the halfway point and at the end point of the last cycle in the Uego, you have the opportunity to ascend. The planet has the opportunity to ascend, which is not going to fully do this time, and the people on the planet have the opportunity to ascend. The requirement for ascension is being able to hold 5th dimensional frequency within your body and your gene code, because if you can't make the transition into the 5th dimensional frequency bands that are the center of harmonic universe 2. I'm not going to read it directly. You can, if you want to read off there, you can. I'm just going to try to, I want to get to DNA. So I'll put the next one up. See, a lot of this information, you really, if you're interested in it, you really do need to read the book, because it's so technical. It's extremely technical, some of it. And I have a very hard time trying to explain it, even to myself. But it makes sense. It's just you need to be able to, really read it and reread it and say, what did that say? So we're just going to basically touch on the primary elements of ascension and of what's coming up on us in the time cycles right now. Okay. Get back to morphogenetic waves. As we explained in the beginning, the morphogenetic field is the form-holding field of any object or manifestation within matter. Now, a morphogenetic wave is something that occurs at the half point and the end point of that last 4,426-year cycle in the Uego. there's a lot of real complex dynamics to it as far as what particles are doing, because part of them reverse spins, and there's 45 degree angles that change as far as their rotational spin. It's very, very technical things, and I'll just leave that for people who want to read that level of it. But I want to be able to explain the basic concept of how the wave would work. It's about particles, but people are about particles too, because we're made of them, and our consciousness is made up of particles. So what applies to the planet and its particles applies to us too. Now, as we're coming into the halfway point, which is at 2017 in our time cycle, there are several things that occur. About 20 years prior to that point, the particles in Earth and the antiparticles in Terra, they start to interact with each other, because the time cycles of Terra and Earth start to move together. So the grids of Earth and Terra begin to cross through each other. When that happens, what they call overtone particles in our universe begin to interact with the basetone particles in Terra's universe. When you take a particle and an antiparticle and put them together, they fuse, and that creates an explosion of energy. All right. When you have many, many particles going through this process at one time, it creates a building wave of energy that continually, you could picture it as every time, like millions and millions of particles and antiparticles are hitting each other and coming through each other, it is building up more and more and more energy, and that energy starts to release and move from Earth up into Terra. But first, it goes up it goes through to Terra, and it goes up into the highest dimensional fields, where the morphogenetic fields for the harmonic universes themselves are stored. They call it a morphogenetic wave because it is taking particles and antiparticles, fusing them together, and making them demanifest and turn back into the morphogenetic field. When they reappear at a higher harmonic. So the particles from Earth, they merge with the particles from Terra. They enter hyperspace into the morphogenetic field. When they return, the Earth particles are on Terra, and the Terra particles are in the next counterpart up in the third harmonic universe. So it's a process of taking particles and consciousness, and through waves of energy at different periods in the time cycle, shifting them from this planet and this harmonic universe into the next harmonic universe. And it's the natural way that planets evolve. And it's very complicated multidimensional physics, but it's also really not that difficult if you can look at it as a tide of consciousness, if you will, because all particles are conscious, whether they're human beings or are part of your table. They're still units of consciousness. A morphogenetic wave represents energy particles that are conscious, moving from Earth into Terra and then on upward through the dimensional scale. There are a number of things that occur during the cresting of the morphogenetic wave. The wave starts to build about 20 years before the halfway point in the cycle. It builds until about 5 years before the cycle, and then it starts to crest, where if you were looking at it as an ocean wave, it would come up and then it starts to taper off at the top. There's a 5-year period at the top there where it's cresting, and after that it starts to go down, and the energy that is being exchanged stops being exchanged. What's happening to create the morphogenetic wave in the first place is Earth and Terra's grid are coming into alignment with each other. So it's kind of like if you take two balls like this and you pass them by each other like this. They fuse at this point, and then they move past each other again, and they're no longer in range with each other. That point, when they start to go like this, and they're almost in alignment, that's when your wave comes off, and then the wave stops as they come out of alignment with each other. That's what's happening between our grid and Terra's grid right now. When that wave starts to happen, right about here, portals open between our Earth and Terra. Something called the halls of Amenti that we talked about in the last class, which are literal time portal passages that at different periods of time open through the sphere of Amenti that allow direct teleportation to take place between Earth and Terra. They are not always open. They open when the sphere of Amenti is opened during one of these morphogenetic wave cycles. There are a couple of interesting things that take place at this time during the opening of these portals. Earth gets infused with a wave of fifth dimensional frequency, which makes it vibrate much faster. That makes it shift higher in its vibrational oscillation rate, so it actually jumps a little bit into the fourth dimensional time band. So we literally leap through, and when we leap through from the third dimensional time bands into the fourth dimensional time bands, there's something called a repulsion zone it's a magnetic barrier that we have to go through. When Earth passes through this, the particles reverse spin, and they reverse, how do they say it, the angle of rotation shifts by about 45 degrees. So there are some literal particle things that start to happen when these morphogenetic waves hit. If the Earth's grids are out of balance when this starts to take place, you can have a major pole shift. Now, usually it won't happen because the particles in Terra are reversing their spin just as the particles here are reversing our spin. They meet in the fourth dimensional frequency bands and they balance each other. So it keeps both of them stable. But if one of those grids is out of balance with itself, you're going to have some problems when those particles start to try to merge in the D4 band. One of the things the Guardians want us to be aware of is that what we do with ourselves here, what we do with our energy systems here, will have a direct effect upon how much Earth changes we will or will not see between 2012 and 2017. It could be really, really severe if the Guardians hadn't intervened to begin with. It would have been. It would have wiped us out. The Earth would survive, but we wouldn't. They're not going to let that happen. There was many things done for probably about the last 25 years. They have been working to prepare us for this period in time, and to prepare us and the Earth to get the grid vibrating at a certain level to try to balance the portals and all of that kind of thing. It requires 8% of the population on the planet to assemble the fifth DNA strand and be able to hold fifth dimensional frequencies in their body in order for Earth to be able to merge properly with Terra during this time cycle. We're not quite up to that yet, but we're close. So one of the things they're asking us to do is learn about our DNA, learn how to use the higher chakras to bring high frequency energy into the DNA, which helps it assemble. Because the higher you can get your DNA in your body and your consciousness vibrating, you're plugged right into the Earth grid. It will make the Earth grid vibrate faster. There's strength in numbers. The more of us that can do this, the faster the Earth grid will vibrate. So it's one of the things they're asking us to do. If the majority of humans totally ignore this grand opportunity we're being presented with, there are two worst case scenarios. One is we do start to enter the morphogenetic wave period, and the grids are so far out of balance that it starts to make seals on the Earth's vortexes loosen, which will cause volcanic activity, and it will cause plate shifting. And it could be on a massive level. If it's really out of balance, it could create up to a 45-degree shift of the angle of the Earth spinning on its axis, which we're history if that happens. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. It's not that bad yet. But they want us to be aware of how bad it could be. They want us to be aware that they're not joking. They're not saying, oh, gee, come be spiritual because it's fun. They're saying, hello, you're in trouble if you don't pay attention. And how many of us is it going to take to get you to pay attention? So one of the neat things that happens if things go right is that during the 5-year period when the wave is cresting, the fifth strand of DNA will manifest spontaneously within the bioenergetic field of every person on the planet. Now right now, we have people with all sorts of different gene codes on the planet. Some have the fourth DNA strand assembled, some only have 2. Now, when you look and you say, hey, I have 2 DNA strands, we see that under a microscope. The other 2 are in your double. Most of us have 4 strands here. And the strands are not that easily divided up. We're okay, once I have my 12-strand package, I'm going to see 12 little strands or 6 double helixes. They're all encoded through each other. But basically, the human being was designed to have 12 strands of DNA. And when we do have that fully activated, we are immortal. And we live in harmonic universe too. And we're composed of less dense particles. So when down here, what we are really trying to do, and unknowingly, for millions of years down here, we've been evolving, not knowing what that meant. What does it mean to evolve? We're here. We're here, we try to survive. That's about it. That's all, as far as we've got in understanding what evolution is about. What evolution is really about is, just like with a planet evolves by pulling frequency into its morphogenetic field from the unified field of the dimensions that it's in. That's exactly how we evolve too. That's how DNA strands evolve. We can use the higher chakras to repair damage that was done to our genetic code in order to get it functioning properly again. Because at several times within the last million years, our species has been altered several times. It's had certain codes, base tones or overtones, unplugged within certain DNA strands, which literally stopped the evolutionary process, so we could not ascend. We have to fix that. And the Guardians are giving us enough information where we can start to understand how to do that. They're planning to give us exercises on how to use the higher chakras, chelantic exercises, to start repairing the DNA strands so we can take control of our own ascension process. Because even if 20 people, only 20, were able to make it through the portals whole, where they didn't have to die to do it, they could walk through, that is such a victory for this race. Because this race forgot eons ago that this was even possible. So we're hoping that a lot more people get to go through the portals. All right. If they don't, there's going to be one thing you probably will see if the plan is going the way it's supposed to. If the natural morphogenetic wave is happening as it's supposed to, you will see certain areas having certain earth changes and large groups of people being killed. It will appear to be tragic from out here. These are arranged. The souls involved knew they couldn't assemble their DNA fast enough. They wanted to get out of here and catch that morphogenetic wave before the portals closed, because they can ascend from D4 while the portals are open. And you go to D4 after you leave the physical body in D3. So if in the next 20 years we start to see more and more groups of people dying, don't let it scare you. Don't let it frighten you. Know there's a higher purpose to it. And know those people want to get free. And this was their chance. So there are things that you may see out here that will make no sense unless you understand some of the things that are happening behind the scenes. Okay, let's see what else I can cover with this. Oh, one of the questions I asked the Guardians was like, okay, tell me, what am I going to physically see here when all this, stuff starts to happen? Are we being metaphorical? Our consciousness is going to move through portals? Or there's like literally going to be holes opening up in the air that we get to step through? Or what? I asked them what it would appear like in the illusion of matter. And they told me two things. For the people who will be able to manifest the DNA strands to do this, they'll experience directly, physically, one of two things. They will either experience a literal vortex of energy, them being guided to a literal vortex of energy that's swirling, kind of like you see on the sci-fi movies. They do a pretty good job of mimicking those, except you don't see them with the three eyes, you see them with your inner vision. Some people will be taken directly through those. These are real. I've been taken through portals. And it's an amazing experience because all of the molecules in your body begin to vibrate very, very quickly. You get very interesting changes in sound, and then everything goes totally quiet and totally black. You see nothing, hear nothing. And then you suddenly appear someplace else. What's happening is when you go through a portal, you're transmuting. Your particles are turning into light. They're going back into their morphogenetic field, and then they're remanifesting in the next level up. So that's what portal passage will be like for the people who can directly walk through. And there will be some. The Guardians are going to make contact with more people. And it will be on a personal basis because there's not a very large percentage of people that are going to be able to assemble that strand fully. They have the chance, but people are so disinterested here on this planet that to have the majority of people take that opportunity to, hey, we have the imprint now, we can assemble the strand. They're more worried about what movie they're going to rent tonight at the video store. But the people who are serious about it and who want to do this and who are willing to learn to communicate with their own soul essence and with their higher self, they'll be guided on how to do it. And when the time comes, they'll be guided to the locations where the portals are, and they will be helped through them. There are some people that will, and this was an interesting part that I had no clue about, actually. They explained to me that some people will be very, very, very close to building that fifth strand, but it won't quite be done in time before the portals close, because the portals will be fully closed after the year 2022. We have 10 years to do this. That's it, to make the transition. The people whose bodies wouldn't vibrate high enough, but were just close, just a little bit more. They've been doing, the Guardian races, through their extraterrestrial contacts, have been doing some very interesting things to certain members of our races. There are a number of abductees out there speaking about, they cloned me. Why did they do this? I've never had that experience. I've never been cloned. My gene code doesn't need to be cloned in order to make this transition in time. But a lot of people wouldn't make the transition in time within that 10-year period. They are actually creating clones that the consciousness can be transferred into, clones that vibrate a little bit higher, that are being kept in between like the third and fourth dimension, so their frequency is higher. They're going to transfer the consciousness of some of those people into them and take them literally on spaceships. And it's funny, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's really out there. Until you've been there, until you've seen the spaceships, until you've walked around on them. Some of us will have the opportunity to do that. Others won't need to be cloned. They'll just be able to be picked up. There is going to be something called transports, where certain individuals are contacted by guardian groups, and they will be told of times when ships are very discreetly coming in, and they want to go. Because that's another way you can get over. If you can't directly go through a portal, the ship can. The interdimensional starships work in a way like a buffer. Just like you put a coating on aspirin so it doesn't make your stomach upset. Well, if we're going through frequency bands that our body can't tolerate by itself, you put that body in a spaceship that has interdimensional cloaking, it has interdimensional transmutation abilities. It serves as a buffer around you. So the people who can't directly walk through portals, which requires that you transmute into light and back into your morph field and back again. Not all our gene codes can do it. But the others will be taken on craft to Terra. And most of the people will not be taken anywhere. Most of the populations will stay right here. They'll go through several interesting transformations during the 10-year period that the morphogenetic wave is cresting and then ending. There may be some severe earth changes, not enough to wipe us out probably, but there may be some very noticeable problems that collapse a lot of the structures that we rely on, unless we get the grid vibrating high enough. It doesn't look like we will, because we have a problem with the Zeta right now, and they are trying to make it so those portals don't open. They're trying to make it so Earth has to stay here for a whole another 26,000 year cycle. And what they're trying to do is block the blue flame of Amenti from coming in. If they can keep the Earth grid vibrating low enough by 5 years before the halfway point, the flame won't be able to come down, and the portals won't open and nobody's going to go anywhere. And the Zeta are trying to make that happen. They're not going to make it, but it is a struggle that's going on right now. Depending on how that struggle comes out, whether we can raise the grid high enough or the Zeta just give up and say, we're not going to win this, or what. If we're still struggling in the year 2012, when all this starts to happen, when that 5-year period before the halfway point, it could cause massive Earth changes because of the problems with the Zeta, because of what they're doing. So one of the most important things humans can do right now is to become aware of what is taking place with this. I mean, there's the Voyager's books that can say it much better than I can. Voyager's The Secrets of Amenti book, that's not even my words. I just transcribed for them. And through Keelantic Communications. They put it much better than I do. I'm just learning this too. I'm a student of the Guardian Alliance, just like anyone who's listening to their information is. But I hope I can somehow convey the importance of what is taking place here. It's monumental in terms of what we have seen. In our lifetimes, we've never seen anything like it. One of the things we're going to start doing once we get the book under control, because we do have our deadlines with the publisher, we're going to start working with the chakra system to start the DNA healing. And that's probably going to be the focus of most of what we do in the groups. For those who are interested, and people who aren't interested, that's okay. But I would still recommend, reading the Voyager's book and any other book that's talking about this. There's several other venues that this information has been given through, and different authors who have come out with their books about it. It's worth reading. It's something that is happening. It's not science fiction. It's not fake. And if you're patient enough, you will find the scientific validation for the things they speak about. They're talking in terms of multidimensional physics when most of our scientists are talking in terms of three-dimensional physics. There's a lot of difference between three-dimensional physics and 15-dimensional physics, but there's also a lot of similarities because they're all following the same pattern, the same laws of energy. If our physicists here and our scientists here understood the reality of multidimensional physics and what is taking place, they would be taking ascension very, very seriously. And if our scientists took it seriously, they're the ones that people listen to. The common person would start to get it. They'd start to realize, there is a purpose to my life, and my choices do mean something here. So, as far as what else to get into regarding this, there's so much data. I'm not even sure where to start or what pieces of it to bring out. It's much easier to read it, for one, because they put it better than I do. I could take questions, which would probably be more helpful, because I've basically introduced the primary elements of the new material that they're talking about, the morphogenetic fields, the morphogenetic waves, and how that directly affects us as particles and people, and that kind of thing. So maybe, if anybody wants to ask any questions or whatever, do some questions for now.
The morphogenetic grid, this sounds like a template into which...
Louder.
The morphogenetic grid to me sounds like a template into which all life is designed and then manifests in reality somehow. I don't know if that's how you're trying to convey it or that's what I'm getting.
That's pretty good. That's pretty close. When I think of grid, I think of the particle grids, which are a level of manifestation between the morphogenetic field, which would be here before the particle grids, and then the matter here. There are certain stages that particles and consciousness go through from going into this field of energy. It's a field of energy that holds the sound patterns that will build who you are or what you are in the structure of your body and all that. It is a template, and it works like a template. But before it becomes a grid, you could say it's made of energy substance that has no direct form, but it's conscious substance. It's made of particle units. And the morphogenetic fields are usually, if you were to hold one in your hands, it would be a spherical conglomeration of energy, unless it's distorted. Some of them are distorted. But they basically manifest in the form of a sphere of energy, a self-contained sphere of energy. So they do operate like the templates. And that is what sets the pattern for what will manifest. And there are stages of manifestation in between morph and matter.
Do you think we have conscious choice as to what we become in terms of affecting that massive energy?
Actually, yeah, we do. What's neat about morphogenetic fields is when it sends units out into a certain pattern, those units interact with the unified field of the dimensions and the frequencies there, and they experience different things and they pick up different energy patterns. When the essence as a soul or as a body returns to the morphogenetic field, it brings with it what it experienced, and that expands the morphogenetic field. So even though it's the fixed pattern through which we manifest, that pattern is continually being added to. Each one of us that makes different choices in our life to go this way or that way, they're adding those choices into the morphogenetic field.
It has memory?
Yeah, it is. It's you could look at it as living memory. I mean, it is living memory. And it's a place where your consciousness is stationed at all times. And the portion of you that's conscious here is just projected outward from that portion of your consciousness that's in the morphogenetic field. It's a level of awareness, too, that's beyond physicality and beyond the illusions of dimensional perception.
It sounds like artificial intelligence.
Well, it could operate like that, except it's the most organic intelligence you're ever going to get, because it's created through the natural dynamics of the universe.
Biological.
It's biological, but without body. It has substance, energy substance, made of particle units, which are units of consciousness that have electrical and sound tone reality to them. But they are units of consciousness, and that's what the morphogenetic fields are made out of. And then they progressively build up into, particle strands, and then, like as we talked about when we were talking about chelontic science, they go from particle strands into particle grids, and then into chelons and chelon codes, and eventually up into subatomic particles and matter particles. So it's our connection to where we came from, and to where we're going once we leave here.
Who do you think writes the code?
The code?
Well, you're suggesting that everything is encoded, like our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
DNA is coded, and not everybody's DNA is exactly the same. And they're probably finding this in things like the Human Genome Project. They're finding probably differences in different DNAs and things. I mean, do you suggest God writes the code? What is your thought on it?
Do I think that there's a supreme intelligence that set this whole thing in operation and keeps it that way? Yes. Do I call that intelligence God? No, because that term has been terribly distorted in this reality. And when I think of the concept of God or a higher creative intelligent source, I do not picture a man on a seat with a long white beard. Sorry. I don't buy into the gods of man, the ones that men have created in the image of himself. It went the other way around. To me, that creative intelligence could almost represent a massive morphogenetic field within which all intelligence exists and always will. And every piece of intelligence or piece of biology or piece of consciousness, identity, walking around is literally a piece of that identity, of that supreme creative intelligence. It's not that we're little beings down here being manipulated by some big being in the sky. We have a tremendous amount of choice, because ultimately we are that creative energy. We are God, but not just the we that we know here when we look in the mirror. We are much bigger than the identity that we're able to put in our bodies here. And as you expand, there's a lot of traditional, like spiritual traditions that do lead you through paths of initiation, which are really doorways of understanding, where you start to expand into those higher levels of identity. You will hit a point where you realize you're a plural, for one. It will no longer be me, it'll be we, because you realize I am a soul, and I have X amount of incarnations that are simultaneously taking place in various time-space locations. You're no longer just a you, you're a we. And when you go higher and higher and higher, in the highest levels before you leave the dimensional systems, you know yourself as the dimensional system. And it goes back to the concept of pulling energy from the unified field into the morphogenetic field, and thereby expanding the morphogenetic field to being more and more and more. Eventually it expands to include all things. And eventually our consciousness does the same thing. Our consciousness works like a morphogenetic field. We bring in more and more frequency, more and more experience, and it changes who we are, and that will change the types of body we manifest through, to the point where we don't manifest through a body anymore. Once you have 7-dimensional frequencies contained within your consciousness, you no longer fit into a body form. You are pure consciousness. And there are worlds of evolution beyond that. So it's kind of a neat process of taking everything that's out here is really what you're going to become. Because as you become more spiritually aware, and as that spirituality expands, you begin to know yourself as all of those things. You begin to know the separation between people and objects and things becomes not real. And you realize that there is oneness. And that's called the sacred law of one. That realization that it is all one. And there is a state of consciousness where you just know that. And it's pretty awesome. You can't put it into words, but you can look at the separations, you can look at different people and say, I acknowledge that you are in this body and I am in this body, but on a much bigger level, you know you are the same being. And it's called God realization. That's what God is. It's when you get to the point where you are at one with the universe and the universe is at one with you, and that you know everything outside of you is not really outside of you at all. It's inside of you. So that's what we're growing into. And it's a mechanical process that involves particles and dimensional frequencies and all that kind of stuff. But it is also a spiritual process that involves cognitions that can't be fit into definitions, but they can be felt. So that's the process I see this as being involved in. I don't see us being directed and controlled by some superior force. I see us working cooperatively with it, or being unaware of it and not knowing how to work with it. And therefore we kind of work against the natural flow of balances that are created from that level of intelligence. And when we work against that flow, we tend to get run over by it. It's like you have a soul level of identity, it'll guide you. So, I don't know, does that answer the questions that you were asking? Okay.
Question. Those people who cannot fully activate the fifth DNA, and they decided they want to die and ascend to D4 and then go on up on, will their DNA at that time be of any matter at the time of ascension from D4? After the person dies, for example.
Because you will take the imprint of your DNA with you as part of the substance of your consciousness when you cross over. So if you only have, like, say, D3.5 or strand 3.5, you will cross over with 3.5, which means very quickly in D4 you're going to have to bring those other strands together in order to ascend. You still have to assemble it once you get over there.
So you will be able to acquire the fifth at that after death.
You will have to evolve it. It's not. Just because you cross over doesn't mean you'll get it.
All right. So
it means, like, some people, if they have certain genetic configurations because of the manipulations that were done.
Yeah.
If they can't assemble, say, strand 4, because they have a distortion in strand 3 that won't let it plug in. If those people drop their bodies, once they get out of the body and out of that genetic configuration, they're in D4. D4 contains within it all the frequency patterns from D1, 2, and 3. So all of those frequencies can be realigned again and they can be plugged in. So that person could evolve. But if there are blockages that can occur, within any of the strands or with any of the dimensional frequency patterns, and it will depend on what the individual's personal code is at. And you'll never know what your personal code is at unless you learn to communicate with your higher self. That's one of the first primary things in learning to build DNA, is realizing you have this higher self, and it's located within the ultra high frequency bands of the third dimension. It used to be part of who you are down here, except they did a genetic thing to us that took out certain bass tones and overtones that didn't allow those frequencies to plug in, so it created division in consciousness. What was whole, that higher level of our perception and cognition, and this level, they used to be one, unified focus, and we understood so much more from that level. Well, you take a couple things out of the DNA, a couple little sound tones out of the DNA, it makes it so those portions of identity can't plug into these portions, and that's one of the things that was done to us. So one of our first healing things is to learn to access our higher self, and as we do that, we're starting to re-plug in those sound tones that were taken out that made that division in the first place. And there is a whole process. It's once you integrate the higher self, it's not over from there. Then you have your harmonic 2 level of identity, which is your soul level identity. It's you. It's your consciousness at the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensional frequency bands. And there are certain things that have to take place in your DNA and in your bioenergetic field in order for that consciousness to embody itself in this body. So there's a process here. And the beginning is the higher self. Then there's the soul, then there's the oversoul, then there's the avatar, and then there's the rishi. And after that, you can get out of here. Evolution is not something that happens overnight in terms of ascension or any of it. But we got a little more spiritual tonight than I was planning, but I think that's needed. because I do try to, present it scientifically, because that seems to be what people listen to. But the spirituality part of it is honestly the more important part, because you don't have to know how to diagram a house with electrical wiring to use a light switch. And we're more interested, because of the time frame at this point, in teaching people how to use the light switch so they can get the lights on and get out of here, rather than analyzing the heck out of the the schematic that you're going to do the wiring and all that. We have that too, and we'll put that in the books. But I think I'd rather just keep it open, and I'd rather answer your questions if you have directions on the material that you don't really know what this means, or you're interpreting it in a certain way. I would rather answer questions and take it from there to make it personal for you, rather than just throw data at you. And the data would be better if I read it to you anyway, and that gets boring, so you can, if you want to read it, you can read it to yourself, or at some point maybe we'll put it on, audio tapes where you can listen to it when you're driving. Auto ascend. 3 easy steps. No, it's not 3 easy steps. But
there's
take a break.
There is something that came out of like Sedona magazine, that the humans right now are ascending to about 3.5 or something like that dimension.
Okay, that'd be the bird zone.
And they're saying we are also close to the 3.5 or 3.6.
Right. And what that would mean is we have 3.5 strands of DNA plugged in. Because the strands go right with the dimensions.
I see. Now, how can you coordinate the, we call that ascension, to these to get to the 5th dimension? I mean, to the 5th DNA. Well, you're still in the incarnation right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plug that in?
One of the most important things is, first of all, there's a real nice thing that happens in that. In the 10-year period, actually, in the 10-year period, 5 years on either side of the halfway point, when the D5 frequencies are in the Earth grid, which means that D5 imprint is available to any of us, the ones who will be able to use it are the ones who have gotten 4 down in balance and plugged in, because you're not going to be able to plug in the D5 strand and start to manifest that until your D4 strand is taken care of, and you can't do the D4 strand until your D3 strand is taken care of. So the first important thing to do is start working with the chakras, the in-body ones. You can start pulling in, energy from the higher chakras, using the Guardian system where they showed the 15 chakras. But you're only going to be able to pull that energy into a certain level until you get the 7 primary chakras in the body that just about everybody knows about functioning properly. You need to balance and harmonize the main chakra system so it's prepared to hold the higher dimensional frequency. So when that wave kicks in 2012, and that the imprint for the 5th dimensional strand is made available to you, so your body can use that imprint. So that would be the first thing to start doing, and you don't even need our material to do that. You can work with other chakra balancing systems. But it's really important to do it, because when you're balancing chakras, you're realigning DNA sound tones. No, not one of ours. Anybody else have any questions?
No? Do you have any questions?
So contacting higher self is also part and parcel of activating the chakras?
Yes. Yeah. And there's a block put in, forget exactly which one. All right. In the 3rd dimension, there are 12 sub-frequency bands. And I believe the block was put in the 7th sub-frequency band, which means it would be the manifest in the 3rd strand of DNA as the 7th base tone, I believe. That's what is keeping you and your higher self separate. So I think there's actually 2 of them. I forget. There's a couple of tones taken out. But if you want to start working with your higher self, start working with the 3rd chakra. Because the 3rd chakra goes with the 3rd dimensional frequencies, which goes with the 3rd DNA strand. And the 3rd DNA strand, the D3, since your higher self, part of it is in D3, it's in the ultra high frequency bands, If you're trying to open up the free frequencies to each other, you need to use the third DNA strand, you need to use the third chakra. And so it's very easy, the guardian system, the way they've lined up the chakras and everything, so you see where it plugs into each other. So start working with the solar plexus chakra and learning to balance it and running energy through your whole system, like from some of the higher chakras. Just picture energy just running down through. It's harmonizing all the way down through that one, down into the earth core. Start to harmonize them and start to request it. It's a level of you. You know how you can talk to yourself in your own head sometimes? Like, you go about muttering to yourself in your head to yourself sometimes. Well, start talking to your higher self. Realize it's there. And you're not weird. You're talking to you. A part of you that knows more than your conscious self does. Go for it. We're trained in this society not to do that. Not to look inward. Not to acknowledge higher parts of our identity. It's time we acknowledge them.
Basically clueless about it.
Yeah. And it's really there. And it's in a tangible spot, too. Higher self, where does that live? Ultra high frequency bands in D3. Where's the soul? Well, the first level of it's in D4, the second's in D5, and the third's in D6. There are places that these parts of identity exist within. And they are dimensional frequency bands that travel in layers. Just like you can have several frequency bands coming out of a radio or a television that give you different channels. Well, the different parts of yourself are on different channels. And you can learn to blend the channels.
And how does one actually know how many strands it has activated? DNA?
I wouldn't have a clue in my own body if I hadn't had the guardians working with me and telling me, or my higher self. I mean, I work with my higher self a lot. If I'm not in the mood to talk to guardians because they can give me some really heavy-duty material sometimes that I don't want to hear, I'll just ask my higher self for an easy answer. And it will do that. So
you know how many strands you've got activated?
Yeah. And I know how many I have left to activate and how much time I have to do it in.
You want to share it?
Not really.
Okay.
No, there are certain things. Well, one of the reasons that a lot of this DNA stuff was hidden for centuries from us was because we weren't mature enough to handle it well. I mean, we look at each other in the society, not us, this group, but like a lot of groups will look at each other and know you have, red skin, you have black skin, you have white skin, and they hate each other because of the color of their skin. You start getting into gene codes and who's got what. Until a species is mature enough to handle that information, it was kept secret. There are certain things I know about my gene codes that I would never have on a video, that's for sure. Because it would put me in danger in this society. And that goes for a lot of other people too. So it becomes a very private thing. You need to work with your higher self to find out, okay, what do I have?
Right.
Or sometimes I can get information. If someone comes to me and they ask me, oh gee, what's in my gene code? They'll give me at least an idea. If they use a term, resonance rate of body patterns, to determine types of gene codes. And say an 11 resonant rate body pattern, which is the highest on the planet right now, has a full set of 11 frequencies. And it has 11 strands, basically. And some of them are etheric strands, where you're not going to see them under a microscope, but they're still functioning. They're sending energy down into the operating strands here. There are people, I think the range is between 3.5 up to 11 right now, as far as resonance rates of body patterns. The highest you can go in a body pattern is a 12. And they can't have them on the planet right now because that energy would literally explode the earth grid. But they're coming very soon. Once this infusion starts taking place, there are going to be ones that, children born that have the gene codes that carry the full 12-strand package. And it's going to be interesting because you can't detect who they are. You'll be able to tell by their genes. I mean, strange things start to happen around them and things levitate. Well, you might be dealing with one of them. But it's a very private matter. And it needs to be kept that way for safety purposes. If they knew, for instance, I know this group, even the ones that don't remember. This group wouldn't be here if we didn't share something similar in our gene codes. There's a resonance rate that's very similar. Some of us are on the higher end of it, some of us are just entering, that zone. But our group is being given some pretty advanced information. That alone tells us that somebody up there thinks we have the comprehension level to handle it, and that means we have more fully loaded gene code packages, because the people with the highest consciousness are the people that have the most expanded gene codes. The gene codes will determine how much of your soul awareness, how much of your cognition you can bring into a body. You know, if you don't have strand 3, you know, in your imprint, you cannot put your higher self in your body. You can't access that level of consciousness while in a body. So the ones that have, you know, like 7 and you know, 7, 8, 9 resonant code bodies, they're accessing 9, 7, 8, 9 levels of awareness. So the levels of awareness go with it too.
I have a question.
Okay.
How much? What's that? I missed that. How much actual work does it take, okay, to do this? In other words, you know, we have mundane stuff that we do on a daily basis, and responsibilities we have to do on a daily basis. How much work, from your experience, has to happen for us to consciously do this thing, and how many hours a day do we need to do this in order to actually do the work?
Well, it's interesting.
Because it is work.
Tell me about it, work.
Well, I know. I'm very much aware of
I
it.
live at a computer these days because, you know, of my commitment to getting the work. They haven't given me a lot of, like, a program yet to use. Now, I went through something called an initiation program. An initiation is when the frequency patterns of one dimension first start coming into your DNA. It's called an initiation. When that full dimensional set of frequencies is plugged into the DNA, that's called a consummation. And when that starts to project outward and transmit through your cellular code, it's called an activation. Okay? So there are 15 dimensions, and there were 15 levels of initiation that I went through. I went through it blind. I mean, I had no idea what this crazy, wacky stuff was that was taking place. And I mean, there's all sorts of interactions with them and very interesting states of consciousness, and like, you know, like seeing simultaneous time at certain levels, all sorts of neat stuff. And it was completely orchestrated by my higher self, my soul level, and the guardians. You know, at some point they'll bring that here, but we don't have it in written form yet. They're not ready to, you know, to teach it. But it does exist. And I was glad I, you know, had the program, even though I didn't, you know, have the book of what the program was. I trusted, and that was the first step, was trusting and being able to surrender it. And I made a choice, and I think that's why it tends to work pretty well with me. If I say, you know, I need information on this, please give it to me, it's given to me most of the time. Because I made a choice a long time ago when it came to, oh gee, I would rather do this, or like, you know, I want to have a career where I have, you know, lots of money so I could have a nice big house, all this jazz. I was put in a situation where I had to make a choice between my commitment to working with my soul, my spirit, my soul agreements, and the guardians, or being a normal person and just, you know, focusing on the material aspect. It's not an easy choice. You know, I'd still love to have a nice house, and maybe someday I'll get one before it's too late. Who cares? You know, personally, if I get to leave through a portal, I'll go. But there's a level of surrender that's needed by the ego, by the conscious personality. And it's not a surrender to a guardian or to a big god up in the sky. It's a surrender to the soul identity, and an acknowledgement that that soul identity is just you at a level of consciousness where you remember why you manifested yourself here. So it's like, you might as well listen to your soul. It's yourself, and it has more knowledge. Once you cultivate the ability to surrender, sometimes it's scary, because your soul will test you if you're testing yourself. You know, it's like, okay, you know, this is a little challenging here. Is she going to run for the easy way out, or is she going to actually turn to soul direction and follow the advice that she gets that way? I've been through those tests, and I understand them to be self-tests. You know, me as a soul and testing me as an ego. That kind of thing.
Surrendering yourself is really surrendering your ego. Is that
Yeah,
true?
but it's not getting rid of the ego. A lot of the, you know, especially Eastern philosophies tend to teach, like, you know, wipe out the ego, stomp all over it, and kill it to death. It's not about that. You embrace it. You incorporate it into the rest of the identity, and it becomes more than it ever was. It's not about, you know, taking it out like it's a cancer and throwing it away. It's not about that at all. So it's integration of the ego. And first you integrate it with the higher self, and then you don't have an ego anymore. You have a part of you that looks out on the world, just like the ego did, but it looks out with greater cognition. You become your higher self. And then once you become the higher self, you don't get rid of the higher self to become the soul. You integrate the soul in, and the higher self kind of becomes absorbed within it, and now you're the soul. And that's how the progression goes. You know, you start with nobody gets lost in the process. You don't have to divide yourself up, you know, your personality up in pieces and cut part of yourself off as bad and wrong. And there's a lot of distortion in a lot of the spiritual traditions that teach you that. They teach us our bodies are sinful, they're horrible, they're bad. They teach us our emotions are bad, or they teach us our intuitions are bad. That's wrong. And that was given to us to keep us blind and to keep us from integrating. We need to step beyond that. And there's lots of ways to do it. I encourage people to look into other venues of mysticism or any of this, because I can't provide the information fast enough for everybody. And there's a lot of good stuff out there. You know, I don't want to create a dependence on me or our information, because I'm only one person, and I still haven't caught up with myself in this race yet as far as getting the data out, you know, as fast as I'd like to. But if I could help people motivate themselves to, hey, you know, there's a real thing happening here, there's a time frame on it, and by exploring, you know, your energy systems, by really reaching for that spirit within you that is your higher you can accomplish amazing things that you don't even realize yet. But if you work with your soul and your spirit, it will lead you to those. It will lead you to understand it. And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed at what you can overcome. You can be amazed at the strength you can muster in the face of adversity. You'll be amazed at who you grow to be. And even if the halls of Amenti weren't opening, it's still worth doing that. It's just because these halls are opening right now and because of the time cycle, this process is so much easier now for everybody. Grab it while you have the chance, because the fifth dimensional energies that come in and infuse through the earth grid during this process, they spark a fifth dimensional level of awareness. We get part of our memory back that we don't have operating right now, our cellular memory. We hit a level of consciousness that we could really surprise ourselves with. It's been there all along, we just haven't been able to pull it in and you know, acknowledge it as ourselves. So it's like, now's the time, it's easy. It's kind of like, you know, so some days it's, you know, really bad weather and it's hard to go outside, and some days it's beautiful, sunny, and just, you know, walk out and have a great day. It's one of those walk out, have a great day times as far as spiritual development goes. There's so much support and energy available now. It would be a shame not to go for it, because it's like, I think one of the hardest things for me to deal with, because I'm very, very spiritually oriented, and I'm not religious at all. I'm very spiritual, but not religious. I don't like organized, contrived things meant to control people, and that's usually what religions tend to do. But if they don't, all power to them. But when I see people like, well, yeah, when I have time, I'll be spiritual. Oh, when I get around to it. Or when I'm older and I'm closer to death and I have to worry about it. They're missing so much on a daily basis because they haven't integrated that part of themselves. Everything looks different when that part of you is with you. And you start to comprehend the deepness of everything. You could look at a molecule under a microscope and have an emotional experience because you cognated what it meant. And there's levels there of consciousness that are worth exploring. So, unless anybody has questions, I've kind of wrapped up for tonight.
Well, before you wrap up, there is always this article that come out that says that the New World Order is doing their darndest best to do mind control in the mass of populations that we have, not only in the United States but throughout the world. What effect does that have, in this kind of ascension process that we're trying to activate on all of us?
Depends on who's doing it and what tactic they're using.
Well, they're using electronics. For example, learn that the so-called high-frequency HAARP machines that's been deployed all throughout the world now, is going to be able to control mass of people as far as their way of thinking. How would that affect as far as the time frame we have, from ascending?
Well, this is something I wasn't going to get into in this particular class, but that gets into the Zeta agenda, because the Zeta are working with the interior government, and there's also a couple other ones working with them at this point. They're intending to set up a frequency fence, which is mind control, mass level mind control, and they need it in operation by, I believe it was 2004, because they want to harness our perceptions in a way that they can start projecting holographic pictures. They can make 5 sense holograms that we can walk through and not know any difference between the hologram and what's really behind it. And they want to use it as an infiltration tactic to take over the planet. This is a technology, and I wrote an article about this in one of the Contact Forum magazines. In order for them to be able to do that to the population, they have to use certain electromagnetic pulses, very specific ones, and it has taken them about 50 years to find out exactly what pulses to use to go with our bioneurological system. Okay? One very easy way to make these technologies not work is to learn to change the pulsing rate of your biological system, because they'll send their little programs and they're not going to work anymore because they were geared toward our bodies resonate at a certain rate. They had to devise plans of electromagnetic transmission that were geared toward affecting that vibration rate and making blockages in that. You shift that vibration rate and they can't reach it anymore. They can shoot their pulses, but it's not going to affect us. So raising consciousness, which is assembling DNA strands, which is raising the frequency of the body, is the way to disable that whole program. But the people who do not do that will be in mind control, probably by 2006. And that's scary. How many of them are going to sit there in front of their big digital TVs and not realize that there's little pulses of light being transmitted through the eyes, because it has to go through the eyes to affect the brain in a certain way to make the rest of the pulses coming through the earth work? And that's something I haven't got into, and we're not going to sell this one because I don't want to get in trouble with people that make digital TVs. But there are certain things that are being done, and there's a purpose for them. Digital TV conversion, last time I heard, this wasn't optional. This was mandatory.
No, it's mandatory.
Why? Why do you think? Why do you think little HARP things are popping up all over the planet? It's happening right before our eyes, but we've been so brainwashed into thinking everything's hunky-dory.
It's called the Videodrome effect.
So being aware of this is important. And being aware that you have the power as an individual to use your energy systems in a way that you can block whatever they throw at you. And as long as you know that and work with your energy, they won't be able to affect you. Then they may have to hunt you, or they really come and knock on your door and really try to scare you. Because if they can't control you, then you're a danger to them. Right now it's not that bad yet, where I can still get away with talking about this kind of stuff occasionally in public and not have ananybody really trying to do me harm. We'll see where that goes. I know people that have revealed some information, some of it that was a lot less than what I have, who have gotten a lot of harassment. And have had death threats against them, have men in black at their door, and strange car accidents happening all the time, weird things happening with their cars, brake failure, that kind of stuff repeatedly. I've never had that harassment. But these systems that are putting in, the digital television networks, the HARP systems, and God knows what other kind of technologies, because they are using a whole bunch of other types of electromagnetic technologies to try to manipulate us. The only recourse we have is awareness and knowing that we do have recourse to anything electrical or anything magnetic, because we are electromagnetic. The energy running through us is multidimensional electromagnetic energy. And if they're just beaming through with D3 or like third dimensional energy, you learn to pull fourth dimensional energy in to your system, and you'll be able to synthesize and totally process and harmonize the energies they're sending at you. It's that simple. That's what's amazing. You don't need big fancy electronic devices and stuff to like counter their nasty little, waves that they're sending at us. You just need to know how to control your own energy field. And that's not even expensive. You can buy like really big machines to like put up, electromagnetic screens to bounce their signals back at them. But if you could learn to do that neurobioenergetic field, you don't need to spend all that money on a big machine. So.
Do you think some of these frequencies can be blocked by shielding your dwellings? Such as, like for example, if architecturally you could design, say, a pyramidal building with proper shielding using certain metallic, material. Could you shield yourself from that?
You could help.
It could probably.
Yeah, there are little tricks like that would help. But really, you can do this stuff, but you don't have to. You just need to learn how to control your own energy field. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. So, it'd be great, you can build fancy buildings, and eventually I think people will become more aware of building in harmony with the energy laws. But it's not something that you have to do, that you're not going to survive if you don't do. At least not yet. If things got out of hand here. See, there's a little problem that I didn't mention before, that when we go through this 5-year period up to the 2017 thing, there's a period of 3 days where the magnetic grids collapse. Briefly. Things get real dense during that period, where it's like pressure. Everything gets more dense. There's more pressure on it, and that's when we're actually moving back out of the D4 time band and back into the D3 time band, which it gets into that in the more technical information that I have. This is not going to have a real good effect on things that are made like nuclear power things when you start condensing atoms. It's going to cause some problems, and there are guardian groups, especially at the Syrian Council, they're trying to work out something that they can do to fortify the fields around the messes that we've made with our nuclear stuff, because it could set off chain reactions, and that wouldn't be a positive thing. We got this far, and it's been taking us like 200,000 years to get to the point where we could get this thing opened in the middle of our Earth core and have this chance to evolve, to take this evolutionary leap. Then you have something dumb like that happen. So hopefully, with the help of the Syrian Council and maybe our own awareness, we can stop that from happening. They've been calling for disarmament for years. The governments don't listen. The Syrian Council has approached them, the Arcturus Council has approached them, the Andromeda Council has approached them, and they will not make any move whatsoever to go for, disarmament, even temporary disarmament. Even for that period of time. Yeah. Take out whatever detonators are, or whatever the things that react with each other. I don't know anything about nuclear power, but I do know that when atoms start to get magnetically condensed, it's going to affect and destabilize it. They should just take it apart for 3 days, when they can locate when these periods are going to be. And that's one thing we haven't really addressed, because it's kind of like, barking up a sleeping tree. So a tree's not going to answer you. I don't expect the government to do anything.
Do the guardians have any estimate on how many groups of people are convening on a periodic basis in order to affect this ascension of the planet?
Oh, how many groups like ours?
Yes.
Like we have this little?
Yeah.
There are actually millions of ones, and they're going to get bigger. They're going to start where there is say 1 million little groups. They'll get into a little bit bigger groups, and there won't be so many, but they'll be bigger, and that kind of thing. There's lots of us. So we all have a piece of the information.
Yeah. So all of these little groups will become grid work.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what they're building. Yeah.
And that's what it's building up.
Yeah. And the frequencies, if we're able to raise our frequencies in our bodies, we become very, very valuable commodities to the earth, because we're able to, our field, our energy field is directly a part of Earth's energy field. where we vibrate will affect how the Earth vibrates. So the people that are working with these concepts and working with the energy fields and trying to make them vibrate higher are helping everybody on the planet, because they're helping the Earth make it through these changes. Because if it doesn't vibrate high enough, it's going to be a mess. You will see all sorts of natural disaster type things happening. We already see the shifts in the weather patterns. And the increase in everything from earthquakes and tidal waves and all that kind of stuff. This is just the beginning.
Changes in the temperature of each and every zone.
So they haven't gotten into too much yet as far as what degree of Earth changing we can expect to see. And I almost feel like they're trying to protect me from myself. Like, don't tell her that yet. Wait till later. They'll let me know if there's something I need to know about or if I need to tell people about right away. But I don't think it's as hunky-dory as they like to let people believe right now. I think that a lot of the Guardian groups, not just the one that's working with me, they tend to say, oh, it's okay. Things are going to be just fine. We'll all get you through. They're saying that because what? You're going to tell us, well, it looks like, maybe a third of the Earth is going to shift all over the place. People are going to freak out. They're going to panic, especially if there's scientific data behind it that makes it look like a definitely plausible thing that could happen. So they're giving that information slowly. You'll be made aware when you need to be made aware of it. And if you're one of the souls who on the soul level have decided, well, I want out of here because I want to catch the morph wave and my body's not going to make it in time, you'll be in one of those areas that get hit with something. Because your soul will want you there. Or you as a soul will put yourself there. And the other people who aren't meant to go that way will be urged to move for one reason or another. They'll find themselves out of the areas that, things are going to happen. Any more questions?
No, I think it's time to rest.
I think so.
Thank you.
Thanks. They kind of went ad lib on that one. Part of it's because I can't read it.
Thank you.
It's too close together.